who are some of the potential back of the roster sleepers that we'll be paying attention to this summer? Will Saquon Barkley's role be reduced a little bit this coming year? And which guys coming off IR are going to have the biggest impact on the Giants 2023 roster? All that coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. I'm your host, and it is the first full week of the dead period of the NFL offseason. 6 long weeks, but they tend to go by pretty quickly. So I think this period is going to go by pretty quickly because I know a lot of people are excited about this Giants team. I know I am, but at the same time, I want to get a rest here and there. So, but nonetheless, we still have plenty of content that we will be covering here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today, I have 3 topics that I'm going to go over. Just give you my 2 cents worth. We've got the potential back end of the roster sleepers. I'm going to give you 3 guys that are maybe at the bottom of the roster or their respective position depth chart that I think are going to be key players this year. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about Saquon Barkley's anticipated role for 2023. And yes, folks, he will be on the field in 2023, unless, of course, he has a season-ending injury. And then finally, we'll talk about the biggest impact players coming off of IR, which players who were on IR last year are really going to have a big role for this New York Giants team moving forward. So that is our agenda for today's show, which, by the way, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. All right, let's jump right in to the first order of business, and that is potential sleepers at the back end of the roster. Okay, I am going to give you 3 names that I think could be potential sleepers, guys to really keep an eye on this summer. And I'll tell you why. So let's get started. The first guy that I have on my list is at tight end. And it's going to be tight end Lawrence Cager. Now, at tight end, we know that, again, barring a season-ending injury, Darren Waller is probably tight end 1. Daniel Bellinger, tight end 2. But I do believe the Giants are going to keep 3 tight ends. I mean, you just look at how the roster has been constructed, and it just seems like they're gravitating towards, doing a lot of 12 personnel, which of course is going to require, a lot of tight ends to be on the field, 2 tight ends at minimum. If they go with 12 personnel or 22 personnel, you could see some instances where maybe you get, 3 tight ends on the field. So who's going to be the 3rd tight end? Well, here's the thing. It depends on what the coaches want. So do they want a guy who's purely a blocker and who's one-dimensional? If so, then they go with Tommy Sweeney, because Tommy Sweeney historically has not been much of a pass catcher. If they want to be able to trot a guy out there who doesn't necessarily tip off what's coming, and by that I mean, if a guy has a reputation as being just a blocker and they put a guy out there that is just a blocker, I think everybody knows that they don't have to really account for the guy in the passing game. So that's why I'm thinking Lawrence Cager might have the advantage going into training camp this summer. Lawrence Cager is a decent receiver. He was a wide receiver, actually, and he converted to tight end given his size. Now, last year, the problem with Cager was his blocking. So he needed to get, bigger and stronger in the off season and just find ways to finish blocks. Now, we couldn't really tell if he improved in that area because, in the springtime, as you know, there's no contact, there's no pads. So, anything with blocking from the offensive line, the tight ends, and so on and so forth, you really can't tell until the pads go on. But assuming that Cager found a way to get bigger and stronger, and stay on his blocks instead of falling off blocks like he did last year, he could edge out Tommy Sweeney and the other guys that are vying for that last tight end spot on the Giants. Now, Lawrence Cager has a really good feel for the passing game. He's really good at reading defenses, getting open, finding the sweet spots in the defense. So as a pass receiver, you don't really have to worry about him. Now, is he going to be a guy that's going to get like 10 targets a game? No. But again, the idea, if you're the Giants, if you look at what they are doing with all their skill position players, they want versatility. So I think if Cager can prove that he can block this summer, he is going to have the advantage over Tommy Sweeney and the rest of the tight ends that are competing for the third spot on the roster. All right. The next guy that I think is a potential back end of the roster sleeper, defensive lineman Ryder Anderson. Now, this is a guy that for some reason he came onto my radar last year. He saw an increase in his snaps down the stretch, including into the postseason. And he did pretty well, primarily as a pass rusher. Where Ryder Anderson struggled last year was in holding up against the run. No surprise there. I mean, a lot of guys on the Giants struggled holding up against the run. So just in going back, there was just something about Ryder Anderson's game. And I said to myself, once we got the assistant coaches, I was going to ask Andre Patterson about Ryder Anderson. And I did. And sure enough, Coach Patterson really spoke highly of him. He commented about how Ryder Anderson bulked up from 280 to 305, just working on his technique, getting better and everything like that. And that extra weight you would think would allow him to better anchor against the run, better hold up at the point of attack and not get pushed out or washed out of the picture. And just, I could see him being a potential rotational defensive lineman. Now, the Giants, obviously, they're going to be looking to reduce some of the snaps that Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams have taken in the past. I mean, both of those guys have been taking like 80% or higher, which is just insane for defensive linemen. So the Giants added Rakeem Nunez-Roches to the defensive line for depth. They are hoping to have A'Shawn Robinson back. A'Shawn Robinson missed the spring because I believe due to a meniscus in his knee, but he should be ready for training camp. DJ Davidson, who was one of the draft picks last year, I don't know if he's going to be ready to go to start training camp. He's recovering from an ACL. Jordan Riley has potential, but he's still a little bit raw given the lack of college experience. So I could potentially see Ryder Anderson, getting some quality snaps in relief, as part of that rotation that the Giants would like to run at defensive line. So that's the guy definitely to keep an eye on, I think, this summer. Okay, I'm going to give you one more. And this is a draft pick. And, it's a guy that I don't know that a lot of people are necessarily counting on. They probably think maybe he's going to be a practice squatter. And that is 7th rounder Gervarius Owens, defensive back. Now, Owens has good size. I think he's 6 foot. He has decent quickness, explosiveness. He's light on his feet, and he has fluid hips. Former cornerback, he's transitioning to safety. And, the Giants, you can never have too many safeties. So here's the thing. Right now, we know that they have an opening alongside of Xavier McKinney. So is that going to be Bobby McCain? Is it going to be Dane Belton? Is it going to be Jason Pinnock? Or are they going to, have a rotation there, which is certainly possible. But the thing about Owens is he can stay in phase with, a receiver. He can make plays against a tight end and a wide receiver, has good short area quickness, and could potentially be like a dime back. All right. So even if he doesn't get the starting job, when they go to 5 DBs, 6 DBs, 7 DBs, if they go that much, he could be, part of that sub package. So Owens, thus far, really not much of a coverage guy, but, there's still room for him to grow in that area. I see him as more of a, second level type of guy, playing down closer to the line of scrimmage, closer to the box, and really, providing with run support, which again, I don't have to tell you, was a big weakness for the Giants last year. So I could see him doing that. And, as far as coverage, as long as he doesn't have to cover a lot of ground and he has that short area, small area at the second level to cover, I think he should be fine there. So Owens is a guy that, I'll be keeping an eye on. Just because he's a 7th round pick doesn't mean that he's automatically destined to the practice squad. So he's a guy I definitely want to see how he does, particularly in coverage. All right, coming up, are the Giants planning to reduce Saquon Barkley's role in the offense? Well, yes and no, and I'll explain why right after this. Hey, Giant fans, get in on all the sports action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if their first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. FanDuel offers great promotions, a safe and secure app to set up your bets, and instant payouts. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Before I get to discussing Saquon Barkley and the role that he may have on this Giants offense, I just want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast, which, by the way, I should have 5 shows for you this week because I just have so much, I have so much that I'm scheduling. So I'm going to have interviews with former NFL executive Jeff Diamond. Emery Hunt's going to be on the show. Bobby Skinner is going to join me from Talking Giants. Coach Gene Clemens is going to come on. And then next week, I'm supposed to be speaking with Mina Kimes from ESPN. And I might be able to get one other person. I'm working on one other interview that I'm really hoping comes to fruition. So just going to try and bring you, continued content as best as I can so that you tune in. So thank you, as always, for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. All right. So now y'all are probably wondering, why would I say Saquon Barkley's role on offense is going to be reduced? Why would I even say Saquon's going to have a role on offense when he's not signed? Well, folks, I've been saying it on numerous podcasts now. I've written it over on Giants Country, where, by the way, I have an article about the guaranteed money and what I think Saquon's going to get, if you want to check that article out. Saquon's going to be on the field in September. All right. I'm not going to rehash why or anything like that because I want to get to the role part, but let's talk about the role and why I think it's going to be redefined a little bit and maybe even reduced a little bit. Okay. So I went and I looked up some numbers. Saquon in 2018, 2019, and 2022, his seasons where he played most of, if not all of the season, he had over 200 touches in each of those seasons. His yards before contact dipped from 2018 right down to 2022, as have his yards after contact. In 2018, he was at 736. Then they dipped to 605 in 2019, and it was at 563 last year. His snap count percentage, 2018, he played 83% of the offensive snaps, 2019, 84%, and last year, 80%. So why do I think his number, his snaps are going to maybe be scaled back a little bit? For the same reason why the Giants are probably going to cut back on Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams. When Saquon first came to the Giants, he was the offense. I've said this before. It was like when Odell Beckham Jr. was here. Odell was the offense. Everybody knew it. And, everything kind of fell on Odell's shoulders. For the longest time, when Saquon first got here, it was the same situation. where everything kind of fell on his shoulders to carry the offense, be the face of the team, be the face of the offense, and so forth. The problem with that type of situation, and especially for a running back, is you start to take a beating and you start to lose some of your potency as you go through the season. So we kind of saw that a little bit with Saquon last year. Started out strong, and then he started taking that pounding, that beating. And he had, the shoulder ailment midway through the season. And after a while, it's just, I don't know that you could say that he looked as strong in the back half of the season as he did in the front half. He got the week off in week 18 to rest, and he, came back and looked a little, more refreshed. But the idea here behind maybe reducing his role just a smidge, I'm not talking drastic here, I'm talking just a smidge, is that you keep him fresh for the long haul. Because if this team aspires to go to the playoffs, which it does, that means we're looking at a long season. So the bye week's not coming till I think week 13. That's a long haul. Okay. So if you can maybe reduce some of the pounding, some of the wear and tear on Saquon, why wouldn't you? And the Giants now are in a position to do that. All right. So whereas before Saquon was the offense and there was no doubt about it, no questions. So now the Giants have Darren Waller. They have Parhizkaran. They have Danielle Bellinger. They have Matt Breida, who could take some snaps, Gary Brightwell, Eric Gray, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt. They have guys who can pick up some of the slack. Now, Daniel Jones, if they need to, get some rushing attempts or rushing yards, design runs, Daniel Jones can do it. So it all doesn't have to land on Saquon's shoulders. And if you can cut back on just a smidge of his workload, you keep him fresh for when you get to the postseason. So that's really, the whole idea behind this whole concept. It's not, to punish Saquon. It's not, anything sinister or anything like that. It's to keep him fresh. So that's what I believe the Giants are going to do moving forward. I'm going to be interested to see what the percentages are, what the numbers are, and if, there's a dip in the snap count for him on offense versus is there an increase in the production? Because the fresher Saquon can be, the better he's going to be and the better the Giants offense is going to be. So that's why I think the Giants are going to maybe scale him back a little bit. And they have now depth at running back. They added Eric Gray in the draft. Matt Breida is back for a year. Gary Brightwell is still on the roster. This summer, Jashawn Corbin is going to compete. So they do have options. And oh, by the way, maybe Paris Campbell gets a few jet sweeps. Maybe another receiver gets some jet sweeps. Maybe Waller even lines up and gets a few, end arounds or stuff like that. So rushing yards will come. The bulk from Saquon, obviously, but there'll be other guys who are contributing to the run game. And that takes some of the onus off of Saquon. And that's a good thing, folks. It really is. I mean, look, if the Giants are going to invest long-term in Saquon, and we know that they would like to, it's just a matter of working out a deal, which again, I think now is more realistic. You want to have the guy available to you. You don't want him, getting worn down to a nub by the midpoint of the season. So it just makes too much sense, I think, for them to not look at potentially reducing his workload just a smidge. That's the key words, just a smidge. So we'll have to see if that's what the coaches indeed have planned for Saquon. We probably won't know that, obviously, until we get to this season, because preseason, even if Saquon shows up for training camp, I don't anticipate him playing much in the preseason anyway. But certainly a trend that I'll be keeping an eye on because I do think that's the direction that they're heading. All right, coming up next, which players coming off of IR from last year stand to make the biggest impact? I'll tell you right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and thank you for tuning in, continuing to tune in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Do appreciate y'all. And make sure you check out the show notes for the link on our new subtext community. It's been an opportunity for me to text one-on-one with a group of subscribers to that service of which costs $4.99 a month, but we're running a 2-for-1 for the next several weeks, where you get 2 months for the price of one. So that's after a free 14-day trial. And so far, the feedback I've gotten from the subscribers to that service has been very positive. So it's just another way for me to give you a little bit more personalized attention and, communicate with you. So do check that out if you get a chance. And again, keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast, because even though we're in the dead period and the summer schedules are here for the podcast, I'm going to just, give you a bunch of shows, because I'm taping often, 2 shows a day. So if I can knock out 2 shows during the course of a day, then, you'll have content from me. So, but don't worry, I will take some time off. I will, I promise. I know a lot of you expressed concern for me that, I don't burn myself out, but I will take some time off, probably early next month. So, all right, folks, segment 3. Let's talk about those Giant players who were on IR last year, who are coming back, and who stand to make the biggest impact in 2023. So I have 3 guys I'm going to give you. The first one is Aaron Robinson, cornerback. Now, Aaron Robinson, I really hope this guy has kicked the injury bug, because, okay, you've got Adoree Jackson on the outside. Deonte Banks is projected to be the other perimeter cornerback. That was the role that Aaron Robinson tried to win last year, until the injury kind of kicked in and knocked them out of that contention. Robinson, even though the Giants may feel that he could eventually go back to the perimeter, maybe he, after Adoree Jackson's gone, maybe they team him up with Deonte Banks. The Giants are going to have to find a role for him someplace this year. That role, folks, I believe is going to be the slot cornerback spot, which is what he played in college. All right. Now, the slot cornerback is interesting. Darnay Holmes has held that position basically since he's been drafted. He's gotten some competition, but at the end of the day, he's always been the best option. Now, it goes back to what I said on a previous show about playing matchups, being able to better match up against your opponents. So by that, I mean, Darnay Holmes, if he makes the roster, maybe, because he's a shorter, twitchier type guy, he faces certain types of receivers. But if the opponent puts a big bodied receiver or a tight end in the slot, now maybe you go with, Aaron Robinson, who can be a little bit more physical and who could better match up size-wise. So I do suspect that the slot cornerback position is going to be a committee approach. I think Aaron Robinson is going to have a big role in that. Cordell Flott will probably have a sizable role in that. Will Darnay Holmes make it? That remains to be seen, but the Giants do have options there at that slot cornerback position. I believe Aaron Robinson is going to be a big option, no pun intended, in that battle. Player number 2, coming back off IR, inside linebacker Darian Beavers. Now, Beavers is not going to be an every down linebacker. That's going to be Bobby Okereke's job. But I do believe Beavers, if he could get on the field, and his primary competition looks like it's going to be Gerard Davis, who was rehabbing from some kind of procedure or injury that he had during the spring. Micah McFadden, whom Wink Martindale spoke of as being one of the more improved guys, from last year. If Beavers can get back to what he started to look like last year, he could be your downhill thumper. Now, I don't have to tell you guys how bad the run defense was last year. So the more thumpers they can get in there that can play that run, the better they're going to be. And, since Beavers is coming off the torn ACL, I'm not so sure I would want to see him in coverage. I don't think he was ever going to be the guy that they were going to put in coverage, to be honest with you. But as a, potential nickel linebacker, I could see it, so I think he could have a sizable role if he is healthy and if there are no glaring noticeable after effects from that ACL injury. What he's got going for him is that ACL did happen early enough last year. It happened early in the summer. So he will, by the time the season starts, be over a year removed from the injury. So there's optimism that he can contribute because he was coming on strong. Coaches liked him. And then the dreaded ACL. Giants had a lot of those last year. So, all right, I'm going to give you one more that I think if he can make it back, he should have an impact. Receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, to be clear, I believe Wan'Dale Robinson will probably start training camp on the PUP list. I can also see a scenario where Wan'Dale Robinson starts the season on the PUP list, given, again, the timing of the injury and just kind of where the Giants receiving core, how I'm projecting it to stack up. So Wan'Dale will probably be a guy who comes in, my guess is, midpoint of the season. He'll come in, depending on what the health status looks like for the rest of his receivers, and then get his opportunities. So what can Wan'Dale Robinson do for this team? Well, he's your prototypical slot receiver, quick feet, decent hands, and decent toughness. The thing is, he's got to regain that quickness post ACL surgery. Now, for the slot, it looks like, based on the spring, and again, this is subject to change, Jamison Crowder will primarily get that slot role. If Sterling Shepard is healthy, and I don't think he's going to be ready to go at the start of training camp, and I have questions as to whether or not he'll be ready for the start of the season too, you figure Sterling Shepard will be there. Crowder and Shepard are both on one-year deals. So I don't necessarily think that they are the long-term answer for the slot. I do think Wan'Dale Robinson might be. So it's going to be all about him, getting back his sea legs underneath him. If he is healthy and if, he can put aside any after effects from the ACL surgery. That's something we probably won't see again until the midpoint of the season, but it's something to keep an eye on nonetheless. All right, so that's the list that I have of potential biggest impact players coming off of IR. And on that note, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. So again, I want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Again, I will have shows for you Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They will be interviews. I'm not sure which order I'm going to put them out in, but as soon as I have them ready, you'll see them on YouTube. You'll probably see them in the audio platforms as well. But they'll all be good. They're going to be good interviews. I think you're going to like, the topics and the guests that I have. So I hope you will tune in. Thank you for tuning in today, and I will see you tomorrow.